Hey y'all, what's poppin' off? Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for being here. Today we're going to be talking about part of my college experience. So for those of you who haven't heard any of my other videos, I talk about it in just about all of them. I graduated from the University of California, Irvine this past June. When I graduated from the University of California, Irvine, I was super excited. I obviously had a huge thing that I had done in my life and was super proud of that, as I should be. We should all be proud of our accomplishments, especially going into higher education, going to community college in any fashion that you choose to go into higher education. Honestly, it's outstanding. It's now been about 5 months since I've graduated, and you learn a lot within a 5-month period, and I want to discuss with you how I think I lost myself during college and how I'm really trying to regain who I am at this point in time. I think that first and foremost, I want to acknowledge the transition from high school to college was super hard for me. I think that not only academically was it hard, but it was incredibly hard for me just emotionally. I would say that from a young age, I was a very independent individual. So I wasn't really taking on a whole new level of independence when I was going into college. But I would say that it was now without the backing. This is such a silly thing for me to bring up, but if any of you have ever done cheer before, it makes me think of how if you're going to throw a back handspring or you're going to do a backflip, there's someone physically behind you when you are training to do that. So there's someone just physically behind you. They're not touching you. They don't need to be touching you. You can do this entire thing on your own. But the safety net of having them there is what allows you to feel comfortable in what you're doing. So it felt a lot like not having a safety net if something went wrong, even though I knew I was capable of doing all these things on my own. Acknowledging that it was incredibly hard for me to transition to college, as it is for most individuals. I'm a first-generation college student. I didn't have my parents to look to or other folks to look to for that experience. So like I stated, it was hard for me to go into college. So I thought it was going to be hard to leave college, and I still think it's hard because a lot of the times I still see myself as a college student. I think it was just a few weeks ago that I was like, I have to study for exams. I don't have to study for exams. It's a lot of conditioning that you've been used to that's no longer applicable to your life. So you have certain life skills that are no longer applicable, and it's kind of like, what do I do with these things? How do I channel these into an energy that is helpful? So that's how I'm feeling coming out of college, going from I'm a part of clubs, I'm a part of work, I have school, I have all these things going on, to now I only have a job to focus on. And of course, I have a partner, I have relationships that I work on outside of that, but how am I supposed to streamline my focus from these several different things to boiling it down to one thing? And it also seems, of course, very privileged for me to be saying this and saying I'm having such trouble being able to focus on one thing. But also, I feel it makes me feel kind of worthless to assume that if I'm not doing all of these things, what is my purpose at that point if I'm not dividing my time amongst all these different things? So right now, I'm definitely saying that after graduating college, I'm looking for a bit of purpose, even if I do have a full-time job. Because in my search of trying to feel fulfilled, I don't want my only thing that I'm doing is to be overrun by my work. I, of course, want that beautiful work-life balance that we all dream of, and I don't want to throw myself too far into my work to lose who I am as an individual. I think that I'm still not finding everything that I need in order to feel complete outside of college. Now, jumping into the actual content of why I think I lost myself during college, it needs some background. I've touched on this before, but I grew up low income. My parents didn't make more than $10,000 a year, which is well under the federal poverty line, but the federal poverty line doesn't even meet basic needs to begin with, but that's a topic for a whole nother video. The federal poverty line basically means nothing. It's a metric that is very, very outdated because of many factors, but the federal poverty line, if you look into it, It sits around, I believe, $12,000 or $13,000 a year. I grew up receiving things like food stamps. In addition to that, my mother's income was from a disability check. I was accustomed to hardships growing up. I was accustomed to hardships which came through being financially unstable. Growing up, that's the primary characteristic I identified with, being low income. I didn't really see myself identifying with many other characteristics, for one, because I really wasn't allowed to explore my identity outside of that. And two, if you haven't noticed, I'm white, and white privilege is a thing, so I didn't really notice my race or how my race affected me until I got into those deeper conversations as I grew up and as I went to college. So I thank college a lot for that. It wasn't until college till I went into full fruition of understanding my white privilege. Moral of that section was that I really identified with being low income. When I came to UC Irvine, it was probably the first time where I got to experience folks and be in the same room with folks who had parents that were making like bank, or what I considered bank, pardon me. And that astonished me. I think the first time that I heard of someone was in my senior year. One of the girls in my class was like, oh my God, this sounds so mean, but she was like, oh my God, my dad just got a pay deduction from where he works. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that. Like that must be awful for your family. And she was like, yeah, he's making $100,000 less than he did the year previously. So he's only making $200,000. And growing up in a household that only made less than $10,000 a year, I wondered how someone could live so lavishly, or what I saw at least as lavishly. I genuinely was starstruck by that. And that probably, now that I'm thinking about it, gave me some thought of how college was going to be, because I knew there were going to be people who were well off. Because I don't know if you're familiar, but with the UC system, in like the neighboring high schools or neighboring towns of the UC system, if you do within a specific percentage, like at the top part of your high school ranking, then you get automatic acceptance to the closest UC. So when I was in high school, I was automatically accepted to the University of California, Riverside. So folks who are in the Irvine area and are part of that top 10% or 15%, whatever that may be, get automatic acceptance to UC Irvine. And if you're not familiar with UC Irvine, or if you're not familiar with Irvine in general, it's hella bougie. First time that I came to UC Irvine and saw the surrounding neighborhoods, think if Barbie had a dream town. Every house basically looks the same. There is no trash anywhere. There's like a Target on every corner. All this different stuff that I associated with, rich people or upper middle class people, because I saw those people as insanely rich relative to like how I grew up. Within my first year, I definitely saw a divide between me and the people that grew up upper middle class or middle class, just anything that was above what I could. For example, I remember that one of the kids within my freshman dorm told me when I said, oh, I'm sorry, like you can't text me this month. I can't afford to pay my cell phone bill. And he just asked me, why didn't you get your parents to pay for that? Boy, I don't understand why that was an expectation, and it really hurt to have that person assume that that was an option. During my first year, that's when I got my first iPhone, and ooh, was I proud of it. I was so proud of getting my first iPhone because I never actually had a cell phone that I could have when I was younger, so it was a really big thing for me to get an iPhone. In addition, when I got my FAFSA, I upgraded from a Google Chromebook to purchasing a MacBook Air. That was very nice, but also I could see myself making these slow changes in how I did things, what I wore, stuff like that, that made me feel closer to a person that lives in Irvine than a person that lives in my hometown of Paris, California. If you've seen my last video, I talked about going to therapy, and I don't think it was until one of my therapy sessions when I started to break down that I realized I felt so far from what I once had considered home. What was my home in Paris no longer belongs to my parents, and it isn't a place that I could ever go back to. It's something that was very hard for me to swallow and realize that I don't have a actual place to go back to after college. I saw myself not being the person that I was in a lot of ways before college. Like I said, I started purchasing things that I never thought I would in my life. I used to be so afraid of commitment, like deathly afraid of commitment. I would tell myself, okay, I'm never gonna get a tattoo. I will never get a piercing. I will never do this or that. At this point in my life, I have 2 tattoos and I have this nose piercing, which I think is pretty cool. So I've definitely changed in a lot of ways that I think is better. But I also think that I lost connection with my roots in college. I started college thinking that I was going to be a teacher, and I still love education. I have a big passion for education, and I would love to continue the route of being an educator in some facet. But I do think that as time went by and I got more involved in the major of political science and switched over, I think that I lost what I had before. I originally thought that I was going to come back to Paris and teach students there and stay focused on just bettering my hometown. Whereas now I don't even know if I would consider Paris my hometown. I don't think I would consider anywhere a home at this point in time. And I don't mean that as like a cry for help or a diss towards any place which I've lived, but I just don't think that I have that foundation like I did in the beginning of my college journey. I think in other ways, as you all may know, as folks who did go to college or are in college right now, college is a wild time. Not that I'm saying like, oh, it's all filled with parties or things like that, but just getting to know all of the different perspectives of folks. There are just so many times where I'm like, oh, I can't believe that someone thinks like this. And I mean that for like the better and the worse. During my last quarter of college, I took a class called Gender and Law. The class went over aspects of gender, sexuality, race, and how they intersect and things like that. I actually made an entire video for a final project that I've posted on here, which was racism by LGBT YouTubers, which I'm very proud of that video. I look incredibly timid, but I'm very proud of that video. And I would say that that class made me come full circle. Thinking about where I started as I would say very ignorant, very uneducated about a lot of topics, coming to the end of my college career where I took that class for Gender and Law, and we discussed a lot about queering politics, which basically is the idea of like flipping something on its head. It's anything that goes away from the normal and traditional. You can simply queer politics by not looking at it through a traditional lens. A very basic way of describing the way that we would talk to folks is we would use gender neutral language, which is a very like basic thing that you learn about when you're trying to be more inclusive to folks. We did different ways to describe people that didn't involve their gender or didn't involve any stereotypes. So if I was talking about me, then I would say that individual in the yellow crop t-shirt, and that's how I would describe myself. So a way that you would queer politics or trans politics is just trying to think about something in a different way that doesn't involve some social construct of categorization. Social constructs being race, gender, sex, things like that. Within that class, we had an activity. Maybe you've done this activity before where you say, okay, in this class, what do you think that you learned the most about? And then you would walk to whatever vocabulary that word was. So we had things like prisons, we had things like law, we had things like gender, we had things like the word queer, we had socioeconomic status, things like that. I believe that the question that my professor asked was, what word are you most comfortable with now? And I put socioeconomic status. Because I think that going through all of my years of college, I learned that my experience as a white individual is never going to be the same experience as POC or Black folks. It made me uncomfortable to talk about that for most of the years because in no way did I want to take away from the experience of someone else. And I think that by the end of the class, it made me realize what place I am in the world and how to validate my own experiences while also validating others. Because I think that's something that is the same with a lot of people that are similar to me, is that you know how to dish advice, but you don't know how to take it. So I knew how to say, okay, this individual is having this experience and it is valid, and this individual is having this experience and this is valid. and then just being okay with that and understanding it. Applying it to myself, I feel like I never could get it through my head. It's kind of when like someone says like a very, very general statement and you're like, okay, but then someone else says it later and it somehow clicks in your brain. That's kind of how this worked for me in that class. I finally felt okay with validating my own experience. I think that a lot of times in college you'll get folks who are different, of course, but also similarly minded, and you may get into discussions with them where X thing happened to this individual and Y thing happened to this individual, and then it becomes a race of saying who's had it worse, and it becomes into this idea of an oppression Olympics and who had it worse, and you essentially have to have it, like, in order to have the upper hand, you had to have it worse. It's something that definitely happens in college. For a person like myself, it really invalidated how I felt and made me think that I wasn't okay to feel the way that I did about certain things and about how my life was going. With that being said, thank goodness I found my way back to, I think, who I am, and I've grown a lot stronger because of it. I think I want to end on the note of saying that the things that you have gone through are valid and that you can grow from these things. They do not have to make you a bitter person. They can make you a better person. Don't let the trauma that you've experienced hurt other folks. It's very easy to hurt folks with the trauma that you've experienced by projecting onto them or not letting them have their own experience and validating it. Just be better, not bitter, my dear. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you hearing me ramble. I will see you later. Bye.